There's been fighting in Ethiopia's Amhara region between the army and rebels known as Fano. Authorities declared a state of emergency on Friday. This follows weeks of violence and unrest across Ethiopia's second most populous region. Fano rebels fought with federal troops in the Tigray conflict that ended last year, but the government's demand for regional forces to join the national police or army has led to a dispute. Helen Mandefro is Advocacy Director at the Amhara Association of America. Joins us from Montreal. Good to have you with us. So first of all, what's wrong with the idea of bringing regional forces under the army, the central government? Isn't that what should prevail in a constitutional order?
Thank you for having me. Actually, that's not the reason the Fano freedom fighters are fighting the government. This is a culmination of really decades of political grievances Amharas have had in Ethiopia. And some of them predate the Abiy administration, such as the exclusion of Amharas from political systems, their exclusion from the writing process for the current constitution, and their frequent targeting of Amharas throughout Ethiopia as they live in many regions in Ethiopia. But since Abiy came to power, he promised initially to address these grievances and went ahead and actually ignored them and created much more pronounced problems, such as the increasing number of casualties against in target attacks against Amharas. Just last year, our organization has documented more than 3,000 Amharas killed across Ethiopia, many of them in Oromia region, where the Oromo Liberation Army is implicated and the federal government and the Oromo regional forces are implicated. But then also, there is the Amharas have had issues with Tigray region over areas called Wolkayet and Raya, and those areas were annexed by TPLF when they came to power in the early 1990s. And during the 2-year war, the Fano freedom fighters fought to liberate these areas from TPLF, not to support Abiy, but to liberate these areas. And once they liberated those areas, they didn't cross further into Tigray, but they were not invited to the peace deal in Pretoria. Although
just to jump in and break it down, is the feeling amongst the Amharas that they're basically being sidelined by the Oromo people? Is there an ethnic perspective to this?
Yes, the hegemonic power in Ethiopian politics right now is the Oromo Prosperity Party. And essentially, we've gone from one hegemony of TPLF to another one, which is this time by the Oromo Prosperity Party. And that has led into widespread atrocities against Amharas, including refusal to let them come to their capital city, Addis Ababa, and widespread killing of them all over the country, mainly in Oromia. But I think the immediate triggering reason for this conflict was the exclusion of Amharas from the peace deal in Pretoria and lack of transparency about what's going to happen to the areas Amharas liberated, the Wolkayet and Raya. And initially...
All right, let me jump in and ask this question. Now that Amhara forces have taken control of some of the towns in the region, what do they plan to do with that? Is this the precursor for some kind of secessionist movement?
It's not a secessionist movement. These are not militia. They are freedom fighters. Fanos are... it's a cultural practice where you pick up arms to defend your community. Essentially, the government has declared war against Amharas in April.
Okay, but they have taken control of regions and towns and districts. What do they plan to do with it? Is there a political plan? You have to have a political plan, right, after you take over a town?
Yes, and the political plan is to demand fair representation in the government because the current government never represented Amharas. And as more areas are liberated, the intention is to administer these areas and hopefully find some peaceful resolution to the long-standing political grievances that have been dismissed, but quite honestly has been...
Okay, well, briefly, sorry to jump in because time is getting short, but what do you say to the allegations that some of these Amhara forces basically are being manipulated with outside support from places like Eritrea?
That is not factual. There is no involvement of Eritrea in what's happening here. As I said, are freedom fighters. They are defending their community against the war by Abiy regime, and there is no outside force involved in their struggle whatsoever. This is just pure speculation and a trend of, honestly, a continuation of vilification of Amharas that has exposed them to targeted killings throughout the country.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that.
Thank you for having me.